Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, August 26th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr. Ohio State's Football Parents Association has a protest planned at Ohio Stadium for this Saturday at 11 a.m. They're inviting fans and anyone else who wants to come out to support their call for transparency from the Big Ten surrounding its decision to scrap the 2020 fall season. This is a follow-up to last Friday's parents-only protest outside the league's offices that generated absolutely zero response from the conference. The University of Nebraska football parents are taking a somewhat different approach. Last Friday, their attorney sent a letter to the league demanding all documents relating to all votes regarding whether to cancel, postpone, or delay fall sports, including the results of all such votes, including how each council member voted, all meeting minutes reflecting all such votes, all audio and video recordings, and transcripts of all meetings at which all such votes were cast, all conference bylaws and/or rules and regulations governing the decision-making process and all assessments, memorandums, studies, scientific data, and any other medical information and/or advice considered by the council in the process of making a decision based on health concerns not to allow student athletes to play this fall. And yes, a lawyer did write that. I'm just reading it. And this being 2020, you can find people online who think this is brilliant, and you can find those who think this is completely pointless. Buckeye Scoop's Ross Fulton joins me this morning. You know him as the X's and O's guys for the site, but he's also an attorney by trade. Ross, what did you make of that letter?
Maybe somewhere in between. I mean, I think it's just a generalized attempt to keep the pressure on the Big Ten, whether that's their public perception. I think that they're continuing to try to attempt to get information. I think probably the FOIA process from the schools, the universities themselves, will probably be more efficient way to do so. But I don't think, in terms of as a legal matter, this letter doesn't really provide a lot of specifics in terms of what's their right to receive this information from the Big Ten, whether the Big Ten even has to go through any sort of formal vote process to make these decisions. So in terms of as a legal document, it's much more of a public relations document than a legal document. Let's put it that way.
Now, do the things they're asking for in the letter suggest to you that they're pursuing some kind of specific theory or idea? I mean, the item about the conference bylaws and or rules and regulations governing the decision-making process, I mean, that seemed suggestive to me that they may not think this was done strictly by the book, or at least the version of events as they've discussed them was not done by the book. Is that suggestive at all to you of anything, or am I reading too much into this?
No, I mean, I think that's certainly where they're going. I can't sitting here right now tell you for certain whether they're right or wrong about that. I think it again, because the Big Ten is, it's a non-profit institution. It's not a public institution necessarily. How transparent their decision-making process has to be, I think is subject to the eyes of the beholder. And even if there are bylaws saying that they have to have a formal vote, I'm not sure what the remedy is for violating those. So I think there's quite a few stages here. I think what they're first trying to do is get this information out. At this point, I'm not entirely certain what people hope to accomplish. I think the ship is sailing on having a fall season for the Big Ten and for allowing Big Ten schools to play this fall. But again, I think they're just trying to keep the public pressure on the Big Ten.
And you touched on something there that I think is an important distinction that people may not know if they don't do journalism or law stuff for a living. You'll hear about people filing FOIAs, or Freedom of Information Act requests, with a lot of the schools. Tom Orr, the attorney who you know from all of the transfer situations over the last few years, you probably heard his name there. He's filed Freedom of Information Act requests with 13 of the 14 Big Ten schools because all public institutions are subject to them. And you can request documents and they have 30 days to get them back to you is sort of the short version of it. And they can redact personal information. So, block out personal information, but otherwise they have to turn over documents as sort of as an accountability thing as a public institution. The only one that's not subject to that is Northwestern, because that's a private institution. The Big Ten, as you mentioned, is a nonprofit. They are not a public institution, so they are not subject to FOIA. So that may be why Nebraska is kind of going about this a different way. They can't FOIA this from the Big Ten, so they're going about it a different way. the letter they sent last week demanded that those materials be turned over no later than Monday, so 2 days ago now. That didn't happen, and the group's attorney released a new letter on Monday saying that the league did not respond at all. That struck me as a little odd because, again, with the FOIA, which this is not, but with the FOIA, when I FOIA something from Ohio State, like the Ohio State-Oregon game contract for this year, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request to get that so I could find out, what does the force majeure clause say about canceling that game. Send that, you receive an acknowledgement from the league, and then they can say, okay, we will get it back to you as soon as we can, and they have 30 days to do it. The league didn't respond at all to this request. Now, they don't have to because it's not a FOIA, but normally you receive an acknowledgement, and it would have been very easy for them to say, yeah, sorry, it's going to take a while for us to get that information together, kick the can for another 30 to 45 days. The fact that they didn't do that, there was no acknowledgement at all from the league, I certainly read that as a sign that they're not going to turn any of this over. They don't consider this legitimate at all. Is that your read on things? It seems like sort of kicking the can would have been a very easy decision here, but maybe that opens them up to having to turn it over later.
Yeah, my initial, what I would surmise is that the Big Ten's attorneys do not feel that they're under any obligation to provide any of this information. And so they're not even going to acknowledge it. If you ask for more time, that in some ways is an acknowledgement that maybe you have, that there isn't a legitimate claim to this information. And I assume that they're saying they have no claim, so we're not going to even recognize it with a response. 3 days is sort of an absurd turnaround time, as you hinted at, comparing that to the 30 days for FOIA. But that's also because FOIA is a law that's, and this is sort of the attorneys in this letter do not cite any legal basis for obtaining this information. So again, to me, it strikes me as more of a first step in a public relations campaign than an actual legal. If they file a lawsuit in court, then they're obviously going to have to provide a legal basis for getting this information beyond what's in this letter.
Well, if you were to by the fact that this is maybe more of a PR thing than a true legal move, the letter on Monday that was released after they did not get the information they wanted talked about meeting with the parents who hired the attorneys, take the next most appropriate step, and then it tries to basically shame the league, I think, by saying that it's frustrating that student athletes, quote, must on their own dime pay to educate professional adults about basic transparency and fairness. It's quite a zinger. I will give them that. But I would assume that you're probably reading that the same way I am, which is, it's a bluff maybe aimed at shaming the league rather than, that's not a legit legal strategy, right?
Yeah, no, there's old legal saying where if, the law's on your side, rely on the law. If the facts are on your side, rely on the facts. And if neither, you just sort of throw mud and see what sticks, to paraphrase. And I think that's sort of what they're doing there. They're trying to publicly shame, which is, hey, as you said at the beginning, there's on Twitter especially, you will find everyone on very strong positions on all sides of this. And so I think they're trying to create a groundswell of support. And, whether that works, I don't know. I think that the Big Ten, even for people who support the ultimate decision to postpone playing the season, I don't think, it's hard to find people who think the Big Ten handled this correctly. So they may get to the point of being able to gather some more information. I don't think that's going to probably change the Big Ten's decision at this point, but it may provide some clarity eventually to the process.
Well, there's this, and there's also the FOIA pathway, which we've discussed a little bit. Tom Orr's and others, including Buckeye Scoop, have filed Freedom of Information Act requests with some or all of the Big Ten schools. It seems like that sounds like it's probably more likely to bear some fruit at some point down the line than this.
I would think so. Again, a really a lawyer would probably have told the universities at the time to handle things through the Big Ten for this exact reason, that you as a public institution, you are going to be subject to FOIA, whereas the Big Ten is not. That said, some of these decision-making processes would be difficult to handle without some sort of internal communications. So I think something will come out of it. Again, what that is, I don't know. I really do have to say, if you think about it, though, I'm not sure any of it's going to be earth shattering per se. I mean, I think we all know sort of the arguments on both sides of this. We've seen what the Pac-12 has produced. I'm think it's going to be some of that, and I think you're going to have, a general risk aversion attitude probably coming across, and perhaps some discussion of, taking the cautious step perhaps, but I don't think there's going to be any sort of smoking gun. But it probably will provide, again, some more light on the decision-making process, perhaps.
Yeah, I think back to the 2018 Urban Meyer, the summer of scandal at Ohio State a couple of years ago, and the Freedom of Information Act request that, the documents that came out of that. And the most interesting stuff was all text messages, and a lot of the interesting stuff had little to nothing to do with the actual case at hand. And it was him saying that some player, name redacted, was had shown up out of shape and all of that. So yeah, you never know what you're going to get with a FOIA.
No, I agreed. And I mean, what I remember out of it, it was that his text messages were set to delete in 30 days. And so, you get that kind of stuff always, that, well, what could have been there discussion. And so, I don't think that whatever comes out of the FOIAs, I don't think will settle this issue, because ultimately, again, there's very passionate views on both sides of this matter. And I don't think it's going to change a lot of people's minds on the ultimate substance of it. I think a lot of this transparency is both, I do think, warranted, but also the low-hanging fruit, if you will. It's easy to target the Big Ten on this because of how poorly they handled it.
All right, that's enough law talk for today. Ross is on staff, not as our staff legal analyst. He is on staff as our X's and O's guy. And I mean, at some point, Ohio State is going to play football again, no matter what it might feel like right now. Whether it's later this fall or next spring or next fall, at some point they are going to step back on the football field and play a real football game. And won't that be exciting? Whenever they do, they're going to have a new defensive coordinator, Kerry Combs, who has to put in at least an updated version of the defense. They missed virtually all spring ball, only got a few practices this fall before they had to shut things down again. They are likely more or less going to have to go from scratch whenever things resume. You hear about people talking about install, the idea of install, with whenever a new coach comes in, or they're going to change the offense. What does that look like? What does install look like? And how long does that process take?
Yeah, install just basically means you're putting in the basis of your offense or defense. So, every offense or defense is based around certain types of core concepts. So, Urban Meyer for me is always a classic example that tight zone read was the basis of the offense. So to me, that means like on day one install, you're putting in your bread and butter couple of plays. So like for Meyer, it would be tight zone read. And then usually what installs they're grouped together. So let's say on day one, you put in tight zone read, and then you put in the play action pass off of that, or, the speed option off of that. And then day two, it's going to be, for Meyer, would have been like putting in power. So, day one, you're putting in zone blocking. Day two, you're putting in gap blocking. And so you're putting in your core concepts, usually probably the first week, let's say, of practice. And then by that point, you'll have put in 80 to 90% maybe of your scheme, and then everything builds off of that. So now you've installed sort of the foundation, if you will, and now you can put the bells and whistles in.
Now, on the other side of the ball, you've got, depending on when the next game is, if it's January 1st, then maybe Justin Fields is still the quarterback for Ohio State. If it's March 1st or April 1st or September 1st, then probably it's someone else. If they're breaking in a new quarterback, whether it's Gunnar Hoke or, CJ Stroud or Jack Miller or Kyle McCord, if it's in the fall, what is the learning curve for a new quarterback like? Whoever that is, how quickly can they get up to speed if there's, and how much does that depend on whether they can have fall practices this year? Let's say it's CJ Stroud, for example, and they're starting either April 1st next year or September 1st next year, and CJ Stroud is the guy who's going to win the quarterback job. How steep is that learning curve, and how much does it matter how much time they get on the field this fall in terms of him being ready and what they can do whenever that season starts?
Yeah, it's like many things with COVID-19. It's created a unique situation where a person like CJ Stroud has been there for what, like 9 months almost. So there's a lot of time for mental reps for studying, but just not a lot of physical reps. So, it's going to be a steep learn. I'm sure at this point he has the playbook down pat, but actually implementing it and working through it and learning it is going to be a steep learning curve. And so, whether that's, the same thing on the defensive side is, they all, I'm sure, have it down, and a lot of it's going to be the same, but to the extent they're changing things, it's just a lot of missed reps that you just need to put in the physical time doing it.
Is that something that having some kind of a fall practice schedule, if they're able to have 20 hours a week all fall, how far ahead does that put him if, for an April 1st season next year? How far ahead would that put him versus if the Big Ten sticks with no, we can't do anything. We have to all sit on the side and not do anything, or a January 1st. What kind of a difference does that make in terms of what this team might look like, and maybe even who could be the starting quarterback next spring?
Yeah, I certainly think it would make a difference. Now, again, the devil's in the details. What kind of practices are these? Are they just in helmets and doing walkthroughs? Are they doing actual full practices? I mean, to me, you can accomplish a lot through with shells and just walking things through, but you need to actually have some practices where people are in full pads and the bullets are flying as well, to learn sort of trial by fire, for lack of a better word, to have that opportunity to practice, because that's where you really make some strides. And it's, if you're jumping from doing 7-on-7s and doing everything in shorts to suddenly having to play in a game, that's going to be a steep learning curve.
Well, Ross, thank you for joining us for two very different halves of a Morning Scoop episode. You can find Ross and the rest of our incredible team of reporters at BuckeyeScoop.com. We have great content available for free outside the paywall every day, and then even more incredible stuff, including staff chats, insider reports on our Ask the Insiders board. That's all at BuckeyeScoop.com. You can also find all of our podcasts by searching Buckeye Scoop on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or your podcast platform of choice. While you're there, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.